So the story that broke is that the managing director of TOR, Mr. Asante Berko, who used to work for Goldman Sachs in the United States of America, has found himself in some trouble. He has been sued by the Securities Exchange Commission of the United States of America. Here is Mr. Asante Berko, nice gentleman, nice Ghanaian gentleman, who was also risen to the top echelons of international business, working for Goldman Sachs in an important capacity. And the record that I have in front of me shows what he used to do for Goldman, and he worked there in an important capacity. But right now, he has been sued. Legal action is being brought against him with reliefs that are being sought, and we'll go through that. A legal action against him tonight is about the Securities Exchange Commission, and they are saying that he has violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977, and is a law that generally prohibits companies whose stock is publicly traded in the United States and individuals associated with those companies from paying bribes to foreign officials in order to secure business. And that's what I'm reading for you on the screen now. This is the first page of the 37 page of the document. And it says Berko, a United States citizen, and that means a dual citizen, is a former executive of the United Kingdom-based financial services company, the subsidiary, that is a wholly owned subsidiary of a publicly traded bank holding company based in the United States. The paragraph 2, which is at the bottom, says that Berko's role at the subsidiary was to develop investment banking business for the subsidiary and the holding company, which included identifying and arranging financing, restructuring, or merger transactions for clients and assisting with the work necessary to complete those transactions. Fundamentally, what they are holding against Berko, and we'll come to the reliefs at the end of the conversation, and you see what the United States Securities Exchange Commission is holding against Mr. Asante Berko, who is currently the managing director of the Tema Oil Refinery, is that whilst working for Goldman Sachs, now there's a U.S. Securities Exchange Commission, and they are putting up the action against Mr. Berko. They are actually the plaintiffs in the matter, and they are suing. Whilst working for Goldman Sachs became interested in a deal in Ghana. The deal in Ghana was to organize financing for an independent power producer during the period of President Mahama. The allegation is that Goldman Sachs became disinterested in the matter at some point, and so they withdrew from the transaction. The further allegation is that whilst Goldman Sachs withdrew from the transaction, their officer or their representative on the transaction, Mr. Asante Berko, continued to act in his personal capacity to facilitate aspects of the transaction. Mr. Asante Berko at that time continued his employment with Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs and the SEC are finding that wrong. And they also allege against Mr. Asante Berko that he had supervised, or he had participated in, or that he had arranged bribery to Ghanaian officials who had influence over the transaction. So again, we have names like government official 1 coming up, as it did in the Airbus matter, and some officials who have not been named have been described in the conversation. Mr. Asante Berko is being thought to have facilitated this, and to that extent, or to the extent that he did such facilitation or created such environment for bribery to be given to Ghanaian officials through an intermediary company formed in Ghana. Once again, very similar to the Airbus situation. It is thought in the allegations that Mr. Asante Berko has offended the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. But this matter, and today Mr. Asante Berko responded, but this matter brings into question something that was discussed recently. When the Airbus matter broke, and we all remember that on social media there was a lot of conversation. We remember that the Deputy Attorney General, the Honorable Godfrey Dame, had made controversial statements, or statements that had been thought to be controversial within the context of the relationship between the Airbus story and President Mahama. He has said at a forum with the American Bar Association that given the circumstances of the matter, it behoves President Mahama as a public officer to disclose his knowledge about the Airbus scandal. And I'm sure that you read the responses that he got from members of the opposition and from civil society. Everyone commented on it. Godfrey Dame's point at the time was that when you are a public official and a matter comes up like that, you need to say something about it. You don't wait for special prosecutor to call you, and you don't wait for this and that to happen. You need just to say something about it. So this is the point that he made. Somehow, it would appear that Mr. Asante Berko is taking a leave from Mr. Dame's admonitions in the Airbus matter. So just as the story broke today, Mr. Asante Berko has responded. He has given his response, and he has indicated fully what he knows about the matter. Here is what he said. We're going to put that on the screen, and then we'll read it together. So he says that his attention has been drawn to the reportage in the local media. In the second paragraph, he says it is true that SEC has in the last week issued proceedings against him. Let's move on because we have to do it quickly. He says that he was an employee, but this is the part that is important, where he talks about the things that happened. So that one we'll read slowly. It says, 1. The PPA was negotiated and executed between February and April 2015. It received the approval of Parliament in July 2015. Besides the funds the Turkish IPP was to raise to execute the transaction, the government of Ghana was also to raise liquidity support for an LC, letters of credit from a bank, of $72 million to enable the transaction reach financial close. To enable the transaction reach financial closure, I believe. The government was unable to raise the liquidity support required, so the government of Ghana could not pay its part. Now, the next paragraph is very important. It says, Goldman Sachs, these are his employees, they pulled out of the transaction for other reasons. He doesn't state those reasons, but in the 37-page report that I have in front of me, which I'll read just the part against him, or just the part of the reliefs against him, Goldman Sachs indicated why they pulled out. They indicated it. So the next one is that he says, I subsequently, through my network, provided assistance to raise the requisite liquidity support to ensure the bankability of the PPA. Okay. In all, he says, we raised $150 million for the transaction through a reputable international bank. Next line, he says, the liquidity support raised to ensure that the LC was issued underpinned the raising of the $150 million by the Turkish IPP. The Turkish IPP, which is a company which now works in Ghana, agreed to pay me, that is to pay him, a fee of $2 million United States dollars, representing 1.3% of the capital that was raised. As he says, as I had spent the bulk of 2 years working on this transaction. So he was paid fees for working on the transaction after Goldman Sachs, his employers, pulled out. Okay. Financial closure was achieved in August 2016. He says, my fees were paid in tranches. The first tranche of $500,000 in September 2016, and the rest in December 2016 and January 2017, after, he says, I had resigned from Goldman Sachs. Alongside this transaction, I worked on other transactions in Goldman Sachs prior to my resignation. So this is the response that had been issued today by Mr. Asante Berko, who is Managing Director of the Tema Oil Refinery. Let's go to page 36 of the material and look at what are the reliefs that they are asking against him, and then we'll end there. The reliefs that they are asking against him, this is Mr. Asante Berko. The reliefs that they are asking against him, let's go to page 36. We'll find it, and then we'll end there. Is that page 36? Okay. Yes, you can see it on your screen there. It says, wherefore the commission respectfully requests a final judgment that A, this is the reliefs they are seeking against him, permanently restrains and enjoins Berko and each of his agents, servants, employees, and attorneys, and those persons in active concert or participation with them who received actual notice of the injunction by personal service or otherwise, including facsimile transactions or overnight delivery service, from directly or indirectly engaging in the conduct described above or in the conduct of similar purport and effect in violation of blah, 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 blah. B, they require Berko to disgorge his ill-gotten gains plus prejudgment interest. So they want Berko to pay back the $2 million, which they described as ill-gotten, and then some other money. They want Berko to be ordered to pay appropriate civil penalties pursuant to section XXX of the Exchange Act, and then they want that Berko, the courts should retain jurisdiction over the action to implement and carry out the terms of all the orders and decrees that may be entered, and that they want grants such other and further reliefs. They want the court to grant other and further reliefs as the court may deem necessary. So they are asking fundamentally in their reliefs that if the court finds Berko guilty of this, of the matter that they are alleging against him, Mr. Berko should refund the money, and he should refund all the other pieces of money. In the details, this story is not going to end now, we know. So in the details going forward, we will look at some of the government officials that may have been mentioned or whose job description at the time puts them clearly in the firing line within the context of the analysis of this case. We'll look at that in some detail in our next program as we get more information. We have sent emails to the SEC and asking them questions, and when they answer it, we will probably have some full information, better and further particulars, as they say, on this matter to describe, to show you. So that is it. The question now, though, is what should the government of Ghana do immediately? Should Mr. Berko remain in office as the managing director of the Tema Oil Refinery? We don't know. What do you think? What do the experts think? Civil society people, those who understand international business, the allegations against him, is it awkward? Is it matters that have never happened before, or are they just baseless and frivolous? Based on all of these matters, should the government of Ghana keep Mr. Berko as managing director of TOR? Has his position become untenable as managing director of Tema Oil Refinery, which is itself given to regularly doing these international transactions? Raising LCs is something that Tema Oil Refinery does every day, and working with companies like Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, and all of these international investment banks is very regular for the Tema Oil Refinery. Given all that context, should Mr. Berko remain as managing director of TOR? It's a question that we ask. And as I said, we'll be looking at this in greater detail in our next program.